So just one more little thing. Obviously, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be leaving you live for the entire show. So if you, when you're not talking or anything like that, if you could just mute your mics, appreciate that. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Please take a seat. We are getting started in a second.
So if you have any questions or answers from the audience, then obviously you'll need a mic out there so that everyone hears.
Got it.
Okay.
So this one works now? Yeah.
So control them. Wonderful, thank you so much. Here you go, sir.
I take care of the XPrize.
No, it's fine.
Because of that.
Thank you so much for attending the event, today's event on a clearer picture how artificial intelligence can help us provide radical transparency towards monitoring, verification, and reporting of climate action, and what are the opportunities and challenges that this new exciting technology faces ahead. So, just a quick heads up, this is one of the last events of this Pavilion and one of the first events as well, because we welcome two wonderful virtual speakers. It's the first time the NFCCC event up here is providing virtual capabilities. And you will see in a second why we could not miss out on those two speakers that are joining us today live. First, let's turn our attention to our two distinguished panelists that are joining from the two probably most different locations imaginable. I would like to welcome everyone, Dr. Dava Newman. She's the director of the MIT Media Lab, joining us straight from Cambridge, Massachusetts in the US, an MIT professor. She also served as the NASA deputy administrator under President Obama, as well as being the first female engineer to do so, earning her the NASA Distinguished Service Medal. And fun fact, she also circumvented and sailed around the world in 2002, a real explorer here. Very excited to have her on the panel. Equally excited to have Dr. Alejandro Paredes, who is the Indigenous Peoples Alliance for Rights and Development Programs Director at the FSC Indigenous Foundation. He's joining us from Panama right now, and he worked for more than 25 years as Executive Director in the global development, focusing especially on marginalized communities and indigenous people, and having like many degrees, which I don't even want to go into right now, like, but later on maybe. And then we have Dr. Marco Schletz on my side, who is a postdoc at the Data-Driven Enviro Lab at the University of North Carolina and an innovation fellow at the Open Earth Foundation. His research aims to drive technology innovation and create new economic models, incentives, and governance models with technology to keep us in line with the Paris Agreement. Super relevant, and really excited to have you on the panel today. In the center, today's wonderful Luiza Barguil from the XPrize Foundation, a representative of Brazil, and instrumental in the development of the XPrize Biodiversity Monitoring Challenge right now, which is basically $10 million promising to 33 global teams trying to solve the biodiversity monitoring challenge. She has been instrumental on leading innovative initiatives such as this and the Open Green data COP wave. And she told me personally she wants to bring innovation from the global south to the global north. Very excited to hear about this. Finally, our distinguished panelist, Matthew Gray, who is the director and co-founder of TransitionZero. For those who have not heard about TransitionZero, it's one of the founding partners of Planetrace. I'm sure some of you have heard about Planetrace. And before Matt started TransitionZero, he was a consultant with the International Energy Agency and the managing director and co-head of the power and utilities team at Carbon Tracker, which he started in 2016. So you can see we have an exciting panel today talking about one of the most important questions I personally think of here at the COP, how technology can help us keep in line with these promises and pledges that have been made at COP26, but also what do we need to know about technology such that we get this approach right. So to get started with this, firstly, I would like to turn to Matt. So the work you're doing with TransitionZero and Planetrace, of course, is rising heavily in prominence here in COP. Like you might have, some of the delegates here have attended the high-level event where Al Gore just recently gave a speech on Planetrace and its importance on all these negotiations here. So I would like to hear from you. Please could you tell us more about your work at TransitionZero and why it is important?
Great, thank you David for organizing this event. And yeah, thank you everyone for attending. I appreciate you've probably been on a lot of panel discussions, so I really appreciate you taking the time. So with regards to the work that we do at Planetrace, so it's a coalition of a number of organizations who are coming together to monitor global greenhouse gas emissions in near real time. At the moment, we have a global data set which has annual emissions at country level by each sector of the economy. TransitionZero is responsible for power generation in collaboration with Time and heavy industry. In terms of the work that we do, it has more of a, I think, a wider application beyond the negotiations themselves. So TransitionZero, for example, uses these data points to do economic and financial modelling. And the reason that we do that is because in some of the regions that we're particularly interested in, like Asia and Southeast Asia, asset level data is not available. And therefore, to do credible financial and economic analysis, we need to have those data points. And ideally, we need to have those data points in near real time. And satellite imagery gives us another data point to put into our economic and financial models to allow us to communicate the risks and opportunities associated with the transition to a net zero economy. We communicate mostly with investors, but in Asia we do a lot of policy engagement work as well. With regards to Planetrace, I think the reason why satellite imagery and sensors is particularly useful is that a lot of the inventories out there at the moment, particularly from countries who don't have the resources to monitor emissions, it's very dated. So based on some work that we've done, we found that around 2/3 of countries who report into the UNFCCC process have data estimates from 2015 and less. And given how time sensitive climate change is, data and frequency of that degree just doesn't seem acceptable. So with satellites, and I think it's important to note that satellites only provide a rough and indirect estimate, at least the generation of satellites that we're using, it is at least a data point that can guide decisions and be compared to other data sets, whether that be production data sets that industry provide or the existing inventory data sets that are out there at the moment.
Thank you so much. As next, I would like to move to Dava. Dava, your work leading as director the MIT Media Lab, as well, of course, your vast experience as working in NASA. What do you think is the importance of satellites and the satellite revolution we are seeing and monitoring we are having of our planet and all the informations we're gathering technologies, how do you think this will help us drive forward and tackle climate change?
Thank you, David, and hello to everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all. So, sticking on the theme of our satellite data for Earth observations, again, we call this, eyes on Earth, just constellations of dozens and dozens of satellite data. So there are petabytes of data a day. Now the trick is we have to curate those. We have to make those machine learning ready. And so we have to really connect our Earth's sciences data. I call them the vital signs of Earth. We can measure and monitor most everything. But we need to, again, make those that they're machine learning ready. And we have to connect artificial intelligence, all of our advanced algorithms, to the climate models. That's the bridge. That's the bridge that we're working at. How can you do that? Well, we are specifically using some physics-informed neural networks. We're using some GANs, these generated adversarial networks, so to show this, not just the satellite real-time data, that's critically important, so we can make decisions in near real time. But we also want to do the forecasting piece. We want to give people a look at the satellite imagery of the future. Why? Because that's where you can really make change, get people out of harm's way in terms of flooding or natural disasters, a fire or drought, and things like that. It really takes the satellite data as well as some atmospheric data from the aircraft, and you need land sensors as well as ocean. So it's really in kind of combining all these sensor and data streams, and then again, make sure that it's machine learning and making it open. It has to be open to everyone. We have to open this up. That's what open.data does from the US. We really need to open up the data and then invite people to work with us on it. And again, serving that bridging function between artificial intelligence, between the climate modeling, and really importantly on the ground, just normal citizen science, letting people have access to the data. It's not just about the data, I would say, though, then it's about changing human behavior. The hard part is not the data, even though that's complicated, but it's really about changing human behavior. It's about changing the hearts and the minds. So we bring in not just the engineering folks, we bring in the artists, the designers. We have to show this and really move people to act on this urgent crisis.
This is fantastic because, I represent an organization called Climate Change AI that is an alliance of machine learning researchers that raises awareness of how machine learning can be used to tackle climate change, help tackling climate change. One of the things as a researcher moving in the artificial intelligence space, and maybe some of you have heard a lot of startups pitching how AI can be the only and sole solution, that's something that made us worry. As Dava, you just explained, your approach to be very interdisciplinary, involving even artists and climate models. Tell us a little bit, why do you think it needs to be an interdisciplinary approach? Why do you think we cannot just solve it with one technology alone?
Yeah, technology is not going to be the solution here. We know that, and we want to bring excellent technology, but it's really to get this right when you get down to the policy, to regulations, and we need to, we have this next generation of climate leaders. And so we also, for our nonprofit Earth DNA, data into action. We want to take all that data, take the climate, but what we want to do is give it to the next generation, We have to be thinking 7 generations in the future. That's when we know we'll get it right. So some of the training for the Earth DNA ambassadors is climate curriculum, but guess what? It's also leadership. It's also storytelling. It's activism. It's negotiations, so that we can really empower these leaders in their own communities, at their own university, at their own school. So it really starts, I think, at the grassroots level of that. People want to have the data. They want to have some solution. I don't talk about solutions. I don't have the solutions for anyone here. I have actions. I know what I can do every day. Every day, just something simple. Every day I can have an action. If you scale that to billions of people across the world, then we make real progress. Then we can actually really accelerate positive change. Then we can move the needle. And my faith and hope is, again, in my students, in this generation of climate activists. If we empower them, we can help them with the data, understanding, communicating it, but then let's put that data into action. So that's what we're thinking about at Earth DNA.
Thanks a lot. So, Mark, I would move next to you and your work at the Data-Driven Enviro Lab that has explored not just satellites, but also other technologies to monitor and report impact. Could you tell us a little bit more about the work you and your colleagues have been doing over the past years? and how it's related to monitoring and can be used to effectively drive forward climate innovation and action.
Yeah, thanks. That's perfect timing, and I'm so excited to be after you, Dava. I think you set the scene, or there are a lot of points that I can pivot from, and Matt, you as well. So I'm coming from a research perspective that looked initially at blockchain technology. So I'm not an AI guy, but I'm part of the family, I think. So thanks for having me on the panel. But so when I started looking at the technology, blockchain technology, it became evident for me very fast that it wasn't a technology challenge. And Dava said that before. It's not about like data or technology, but it's about how we use these different approaches to create better systems so that we can govern our climate change agenda and cooperate on a global scale. And for this, our research has been focusing on multiple layers. So we like to think about a technology stack of multiple technologies that are heavily interconnected. Starting with the sensoric layer of satellite, or also going to the local scale with like smart meter devices or other local sensors. Then using AI to progress the data and verify it and anticipate what we can use it for. And Dava mentioned about like using it for something like predicting even, which I think will be becoming increasingly relevant in the future. And then using the blockchain layer to disseminate it and to create interoperable systems so that we can actually harmonize or connect the currently very fragmented landscape of actors. So at the moment, we have so many actors that are collecting data somewhere, but we don't really manage to create a global platform that we can actually use to inform our decisions. And this is something that a community evolves around. And I think Planetrace is a perfect example for that a lot of organizations need to collaborate in order to cover all the different levels that we have in the climate layer. And it's not only like the state level, it's not, there are a lot of like non-state actors that are getting increasingly relevant. And then we have different sectors that we need to cover. So there are a lot of different data bits and pieces that we need to piece together to solve this puzzle, and we are just scratching the surface of that.
That's very interesting to hear, and also important to mention that there's just more technology than artificial intelligence that can contribute to that solution. So, Luiza, I need a perspective from South America here. I know that you've been, like, also from personal conversations, driving a lot of the attention of technology. Is not just about technology, but also about people. So is climate change. It's not about extreme weather. It's mostly about people who are getting affected. When you were designing and driving towards innovation in the XPrize, for example, driving like the competition to monitor biodiversity, what are the things as a technologist you sometimes miss and don't see, but it's really important to take into consideration when designing technologies that affect people?
So thank you, David, for having me at this panel. I have an AI background, and I took a master's in AI when I was 19, not too long ago. And I was actually using satellite data to understand which of the agricultural cultures would be most suitable to the Brazilian soil in each of the regions. And this system actually is still used by our Agricultural Research Institute. And so I took another route. I went to the financial market. I don't know why, but finally I'm back, and very happily back. And when I decided to come back, I started working with the XPrize in order to find out a way to actually make the stand forest valuable, because we are not there. We are not in the forest. We are not living in the forest. But there are 56 million people living in and from the rainforest. So this is another technology that I'll bring in a while. So we decided to launch this $10 million, 5 years XPrize in order to not only map the rainforest biodiversity, but from the canopy to the underground, because it's very dense. The rainforests are very dense, so it's kind of challenging. So the idea is to have like drones with sensors, monitoring, go all the way. And then we are also applying an AI algorithm based on deep learning in order to extract insights from all this data that the team that will actually win the XPrize will be able to deploy. So this is the second part of it. The third part of it, because I was actually idle, I decided to engage recently in a data cooperative in Brazil, and it has a lot to do with what Dr. Dava brought. It's not only about AI, it's not only about satellite images, it's about what in Brazil we call social technologies. So we are actually creating this green data cooperative in order to be able to collect data from the indigenous communities, from all the startups that are actually developing solutions for both the climate and the biodiversity, and all these small projects and all the researchers that are on this early stage innovation that we call. You know, so it is first based in Brazil, but we are actually expanding it to the Amazonian countries and to the global south, actually, to all the rainforests. So it has a lot to do with what Mark brought. It's about having an open data, but in a different perspective. That's why we are using the cooperative approach, because who owns the data? The indigenous communities. So what is the value of each data point? So let's be fair here. So it has to do with climate justice as well. So it's applying technology to unlock capital for early stage innovation in a data governance approach. So that's basically what I'm doing right now, but I'm not busy enough. So if you guys come with another, challenging project, I'm in.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this answer. And it's a very wonderful transition to Alejandro, who has been working for many, many decades with in local development, global development, and with marginalized communities. So we've been seeing a tremendous interest here at this COP on the development and deployment of new technologies, especially artificial intelligence, to track and trace and monitor everything which is even possibly correlated or involved with climate. Do you feel that indigenous voices and perspectives and marginalized communities are here heard correctly? And what is your opinion on this attention that we are currently seeing on technologies? Do you feel indigenous voices are correctly represented in this process?
David, thank you very much, and also to Climate Change and everybody else for the opportunity to participate in this panel as a representative of the FSC Indigenous Foundation. The concept addressed at this conference is in line with the mission of the Indigenous Foundation to support Indigenous peoples' organizations, their partners, to identify special activity related to mitigation of the effects of climate change. Our mission is to unlock the enabling environment to secure Indigenous people's rights and to promote Indigenous-based solutions within 300 million hectares of forest in the planet. Of course, Indigenous peoples around the world almost represent 5% of the population, world population, and has almost 45% of the biodiversity forest in the planet also. So when you're talking about a problem of the planet, it's so complex and important that we need to make sure that we involve as many actors and stakeholders to provide a long, sustainable solution. So we, as the Indigenous Foundation, what we believe it's very important, it's science, technology, what we're talking about right now. But science, technology in itself is not enough. We can go back to history and understand that scientists like Copernicus or Galileo, their peers, when they came up with great ideas, scientific ideas, they didn't believe in them. So we, as the Indigenous Foundation FSC, we have a core element which is trust. Trust in the Indigenous peoples and organizations and communities around the world. We have a great networking, so it's technology, but trust is the key element in the foundation. When you have trust with the Indigenous peoples and around with other different stakeholders, you can speed and accelerate any kind of initiative or solution in that case. So the Indigenous Foundation has an indigenous nature-based solution, not only a market-based solution or a nature-based solution, but it's an indigenous nature-based solution. And we do believe that we need to join efforts in a collaborative, together in such a way that we can provide synergize with many different stakeholders. For instance, our mother organization, FSC, Forest Tourism Council, has more than 25 years of experience, positioned in more than 130 countries around the world, and has connected with more than 45,000 companies around the world. So when you bring all those kind of FSC, the Indigenous Foundation, we have a different portfolio of initiatives and programs and projects, and one of them is the IPAR program funded by USAID, which is the biggest international cooperation agency in the world, but funded also by FSC and other private sector. When you connect all those elements and bring the good and best practices with trust in technology and science, then you can have definitely something sustainable and a solution for what we're basically addressing in the planet and just living right now.
Thank you so much. This is such an important topic you're raising, that technology is not here just about efficiency, not about crude numbers. It's all about trust within the people who use and develop the technologies. But also the technology itself is here to increase trust. Trust as a reoccurring theme, but how do we actually solve it? Dava, when you work with so many stakeholders in your different positions, how do you think technology can enhance trust, or do you feel like it's the opposite way, that sometimes when we see our technological solutions that deployed, that it actually tears away people from being trusting each other?
It's such an important discussion, and so it's co-creation, I think, is how you enable trust. It's not something that we just do the development at the universities or in the private sector, because that doesn't work. Then we're just doing it among our own communities. What we need to do is be out in the community, have some ideas, show some demos. In the Media Lab, we love to show demos and prototype, but we need to bring people in to the conversation. When I make the point of the indigenous communities, that's the ancient wisdom. These are our colleagues, our folks who know how to live in balance with nature. And so we all have to be at the table together. And I have much more to learn from them than I can teach them about deploying our technologies. But if we're all around the table together, contributing what we have to offer. So it's the technology, it's the wisdom, it's the stories, it's what works. It's tens of thousands of years of what works. So if we can capture that, into our technologies and co-create these solutions, then I think we'll be on a really promising future path.
So Matt, to focus back to the deployment and the trust issue here, Planetrace and Al Gore has stated it a lot, especially with the facts that Planetrace is one of the first global independent report of emissions that is not relying on self-reporting, and that increases trust. Do you think Planetrace is an essential tool for the trust-making process that is required, maybe even missing currently at COP26 and nations NDCs?
Really good question. What I would say is I think it's another important data point. Like I said in my opening remarks, there's so many countries out there that just don't have up-to-date data, and that's very problematic if you're coming into a negotiation and you're looking at data that's 5 years old, because a lot can change in 5 years. But I think the wider issue here is, what exactly are we optimizing for? Are we optimizing for country level emissions? Because if we're doing that, then to be honest, the bar's pretty low due to the delays in data and the ways in which these existing inventory data sets are put together. Or are we optimizing for company behavior? Do we want to make sure companies are saying what they do in their sustainability reports? So I really think that that's the first question we should be asking ourselves is, what are we doing this for? Initially, with regards to Planetrace, our focus is to do country-level data sets because that's the easiest thing to put together. The next phase of Planetrace will be going to the asset level. So, for example, we'll be releasing data which will provide monthly estimates of steel plant emissions across the globe. And we believe that that data point will usher in a new wave of applications and a new way for governments to not only understand where they're at, but understand what's happening in their country at any given time.
That leads to a very certain outcome, unfortunately, which already has happened, which is discrepancies between self-reporting and what satellites see and monitor. So if that happens on a country level, with Planetrace reporting numbers that are either significant higher or significant lower than a country level report, or maybe later on a company-based report, who should we trust?
I don't think we should trust anyone, to be the honest answer. I think, so I can answer from TransitionZero's perspective. So how we see satellite imagery and the data points that it provides us is it is a shadow reporting system. So we can come up with an estimate. If that estimate is consistently different from what the company or the country is telling us, then we wouldn't immediately imply that something's going wrong, but I think it warrants further investigation. And that's what we're trying to advocate with the work that we're doing. So China has an emissions trading scheme, for example. Half the world's coal plants are covered in that scheme. Data challenges are quite common in China. So what we are advocating that the Chinese government do, principally to save money and make their regulation more effective, is to use satellite imagery as a way of understanding where potential data issues may be. So rather than auditing each and every coal plant, and there's thousands of them, which will cost a lot of money, they can use satellites as a first scan of these plants or these areas, potentially misreporting or getting their data reporting wrong. And then they can target and do selective audits rather than auditing everything.
So you wanted to...
Yeah, I just got excited here, so I want to jump in. So in 2016, The Economist launched an article that was titled Blockchain, the Trust Machine. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is to showcase how wrong they were. I mean, there is no one single technology that just solves everything and just builds a trusted system. I think trust comes from transparency, and transparency comes from having very good and well-designed and inclusive transparency systems. So it's not about if Planetrace is right or if the self-reported data is right, but the trust in the system depends on the different actor groups that are participating in the system. So it's not like two entities against each other, but the systems in terms of transparency that we need to build are having thousands and millions of actors that are reporting their data and their perception on the ground or from the satellite perspective. And I think, sorry that I'm jumping a bit ahead, but I think just to showcase that also it's great to have Alejandro, for example, here on the panel, or Luiza as well. It's not only that the global north is developing fancy technology solutions. It's kind of the opposite. What we want to achieve is to create inclusive systems that makes it a lot easier for all the actors, especially ones with limited capacities, to join our transparency efforts. Because at the moment, the vast majority of actors doesn't really have the capacity to do proper accounting and to join in what we're doing. And I think that is what technology and the systems that we are thriving to create are really important about.
And just to add to that, I think Al Gore came up with a really neat phrase of summarizing Planetrace in this context. So a journalist recently asked him, is Planetrace the climate cops? And he responded by saying that we're more of a neighborhood watch.
David?
Yes.
Can I just add there?
Of course.
I think that going back to history is very important. The Industrial Revolution brought a lot of benefits and progress to civilization, to the world, but at the same time, we were not able to identify the consequences, the effects that we're basically living right now. But one of the elements that the Industrial Revolution gave us is a specialization. So when we start to look into education to specialize us, a PhD, a master's degree, or a bachelor's degree in the university, we become silos. And when we have a silos perspective, we don't see a lot of things. So now we're talking about having critical thinking. So when we see the numbers or the data, and we see that there's something wrong, or maybe it's not something that is matching, then we need some critical thinking. The indigenous peoples around the world, they implement ancestral wisdom. And the ancestral wisdom is holistic, integral, systemic, in such a way that it's not silos, but it integrates everything from society to provide a long, sustainable solution. So we as Western, we need to learn a lot from indigenous in how they resolve problems, see an issue, and provide a long, integrated solution. Thank you.
Luiza, I just heard a really loud yes on my side here. Would you like to add on?
Definitely. So I hear a lot about transparency and trust. And then how do we build trust? And definitely it's not with hard technology only. So that's the reason why I brought at first the social technology co-creation way, as Dr. Dava mentioned, because we will not have the trust from the indigenous communities in Brazil and nowhere if we are there with this colonialist approach. We are not there to teach them. I mean, let's be humble here. We are there to learn from them, and that's from that place, they will cooperate. From that place, they will trust that we are doing that. We are using technology for good. I had the chance, flying from São Paulo to Glasgow, to escort one of our indigenous leaders. We have 40 indigenous leaders from Brazil here attending the COP26. Because the person that was supposed to come with her forgot his passport at the indigenous community. So he was like freaking out in the airport when he saw me. He says, listen, Luiza, can you please escort Juma Shipaya? She's 26 years old and she's one of the strongest and most serene person I've seen in my whole life. So she was there extremely calm, not pretending, not someone that has just taken a medicine. She was extremely calm. And then I asked her, listen, Juma, aren't you nervous because you were about to lose the opportunity to attend the COP26? And then she says, no, by no means. I was just, in her words, emanating to the universe the solution to that problem, and God brought you. And I said, oh gosh, that's a responsibility here. So, and that's from that place. And she has a fantastic story, as most of them, you know, fighting for their rights, fighting for their territory, fighting for their families, you know. So if we go there with this approach, they will trust us, because it's not only about hard technology, it's about social technology as well. Otherwise, and that's the last word that I would like to bring, we are going to have a very biased result. as most of the algorithms that now are, you know, what is the outcome of the algorithms that we have now? They are basically developed by white men from the north. So, I mean, we are missing like something here, right? The whole planet, I would say. So this is the third word: transparency, trust, and inclusiveness. So let's bring the whole if we want to create a trustable solution, including all the technologies, all the people, all the genders.
Dava, to move the conversation a little bit back to the technology focus here, but also to, I couldn't not think about when I was reading a recent news article report where the Greenpeace director here at COP saying that there has been these many bleaches and different kind of predictions what temperature we will arrive with the bleaches. So there's, according to the long-term vision, we've seen that we might get it shortly below 2 degrees, 1.9 degrees, but then Climate Action Tracker today announced that the short-term initiatives that currently countries have been promising would lead us to an increase of 2.4 degrees. And she mentioned it's like looking through a telescope, seeing an asteroid coming close to the Earth, and I had to think of your background. Are there technologies, are these technologies which are coming up now something that gives you hope that we can manage and manage the climate crisis? Or by working so close with these technologies and these innovations, especially in your role at MIT Media Lab, do you see there are limits where there's just not, there's something technology cannot solve which we need to bring in something else?
So yes to both. Let me give an example, and it complements the previous speakers as well. But we need algorithmic justice. So the technology needs to work for everyone, and it needs to be representative of everyone. So that's step one. When we talk about, you mentioned the data and the climate data. Let's not argue about the tenths of percent. We know the trends. We know we're warming. What we need to do, it's urgent, is again, get to actions, get to some agreements, because there's no disputing in terms of the amount of change and the increasing change. We shouldn't get caught around arguing about, in my opinion, 1/10 of a degree, 2/10 of a degree. We know where it's going. And so we have to, in real time, try to monitor, has been said before, get the most current data that we can. But we are developing, algorithms, but again, these are algorithmic justice. They have to work for everyone. They have to identify across the board. They have to be developed and co-created by everyone. It won't be a technology solution. The technology helps, it informs us, it educates us when we, all of the data. But then let's get on with getting some of the solutions together, getting the people that have the wisdom, that have give people voice. We need to give Indigenous communities voice. We need to give the people who are living in balance, the peoples whose island nations are flooding. We need to give people voice. It's urgent to give people voice and act, as was mentioned before, globally, holistically. From my perspective, call this spaceship Earth. We are all in this spaceship together. We are all astronauts, and we have one planet. And so we have to put the planet, humanity, and all of our neighbors, and that means all of our neighbors first. So we have to move from some of the self-interest. We have to move toward more of also doing what's right. That should be the guiding principle. Are we helping as many people as humanly possible? That has to be the focus, and then changing the behaviors accordingly.
Thank you so much for that beautiful answer. You mentioned that what technology provides us and can provide us is real-time monitoring of action. That's something that has been a really important topic here at COP, where delegates are right now in the negotiations hall discussing if we should have updated NDCs every year or keep with every 5 years. That's happening right here. But I want to bring the perspective a little bit differently to a question to Alejandro, which focuses on monitoring, of real-time monitoring of everything. Alejandro, do you think we should monitor everything? What about the indigenous sites? What about the people who are living there? Should we, is that okay from your perspective that we monitor this?
That's a very good question, David. And we must understand that trying to monitor everything, it's very expensive, and sometimes it's not very effective. Usually, if you select the different indicators that you want to monitor, that's enough. When you go more than that, you'll receive a different kind of answers or contrary to what you're basically looking at the data. And most important, it's just making sure that you have the indigenous perspective and data from them. It's very easy from top to down just to thinking something very strategic, very macro, and leave out the indigenous from the design. Dava has twice mentioned this word, and it's very important for us, co-creation. Where you're talking about a solution for the planet, you're talking about indigenous nature-based solution. That means co-creating with the indigenous communities and peoples and leaders around the world. That means that they're not beneficiaries. They're part of the solution. We bring them during the design phase, during the planning phase, and then during the implementing, and then the monitoring. And they're going to tell us, as Luiza was telling us a few minutes before, it's not something that we're going to teach them. We're going to learn from them, from the indigenous people, what they have been doing for thousands of years in that case. So it's very important to not see the indigenous people as beneficiaries, where we just apply a monitoring tool or technique, but right holders, somebody and actors that will provide a solution or part of the solution what we're dealing around the world. So that's very important to have that kind of a chief of paradigm in our minds.
Luiza, from your work at the XPrize Foundation designing the biodiversity competition prize and challenge, what were the things you learned from indigenous people when designing this? Could you give us some examples that are more clear? Like, what are the lessons learned which could be implemented very usefully that in the end actually save you more time than spent?
Actually, I was kind of bold when I told the XPrize board that I would not join the design team if we didn't have an indigenous, at least one indigenous person. And then they said, okay, you can choose. And then I chose a shaman from the Amazon region, right on the border from Brazil to Peru. And it was really bold. I mean, people were looking at me like, wow, she's now going mad, I don't know. But then he brought us lots of wisdom. He brought us an extreme from the ground perspective that no one of us on that room, and we had a kind of a brain trust there, would ever come up to. So we could design an inclusive competition that will provide a solution that will apply not only to the, sorry guys, but not only to the global north, but to the indigenous communities, because at the end of the day, who are the guardians of the forest? So, I mean, it was the right thing to do, and I'm very glad that the XPrize Foundation was resilient enough to take that offer. And he actually, his name is Bank. He comes from the Ashinika ethnics. And he's now on our advisory board. So he will be overseeing everything that each team is actually presenting as a solution. So he is the one that has the constraint vote. So, I mean, we were able to make such a bold governance for this XPrize, and I'm very glad to be part of it.
Can you believe already what time it is? We have only 7 minutes left on our panel, and I want to make use of these last 7 minutes for each of the panelists to understand that we are here at very special times. The world is looking at Glasgow right now, at us what we're saying about technology. The delegates are looking forward to see an opinion to know if technology is something they can implement into their policies, can trust or not. So I want to give every panelist a couple of last closing words. What are the things you want the delegates here at the UNFCCC Pavilion to hear and know, and also the people at live stream? What is your opinion on technology, and what is your opinion on the theme of radical transparency, how technology can be used or maybe not used for monitoring climate action? Maybe Matt, if you could start the closing remarks.
Yeah, sure. So I would just echo my previous comments, which our sensors and satellites are just another tool in the toolbox. They're not a silver bullet, or at least, as Alejandro said, there will only be. It's very expensive to have satellites getting direct observations of CO2 emissions. But what they can do is provide another data point and provide a way of reducing regulatory costs and ensuring that they're coming into these negotiations with the most up-to-date data. It might not be perfect, but it's certainly better than relying on a data point from 5 years ago. So that's what I would emphasize, and also emphasize the need for collaboration, the need to work together to engender trust and engender transparency.
Thank you so much. Luiza, would you go next?
I would leave the delegates a question. What is the question that you want to make for all the technologies, not AI only, not blockchain only, and to the social technologies as well? So what is the question that you delegates want to make in order for you to make the right decisions?
Marco?
So we are gathering here to negotiate and design the systems of the future. The Paris Agreement is 5 years old, and we are currently discussing what's going to happen in the next 50 to 100 years. And at the same time, our societies are going through the digital revolution already. We can see the prominent roles of the big tech companies, which is more of a problem right now. But then at the same time, we see I don't want to be linked too much to cryptocurrencies, but I think you can at least see some promising examples there, how technologies can have a very good impact and how we can create decentralized systems. And not taking these disruptive technologies into consideration here at the negotiations, when we are speaking about the systems of the next 50 to 100 years, and we are currently applying legacy logic. We haven't done much progress on transparency reporting over the last 10 years, and we have these technologies that are maturing now. They are coming up, they are available now, so please consider them, but consider them in a human context. So we need to co-create the solutions. There's not one technology to solve all of our issues, but we need to bring the right actors together in order to create better systems. It's not about data, it's not about technology, it's about the systems that we need to create.
Dava, what's the one thing you would like the delegates here at COP26 to go home with?
Oh, I have a few things, more than one,
Yes,
if I can.
Yes,
First,
please.
I say we need everyone. We need everyone. We need everyone's input onto this. You've mentioned the co-creation, but really, when you're trained in one discipline, I think it's our responsibility and job to invite someone else, probably someone maybe you even disagree with. So we need everyone to have the dialogue. That's how we're going to move forward to build those bridges. We really need to build the bridges between the data, the AI, but also the climate models and the policy makers and the governance. We all have to be at the table together. We know the urgency. And the final thing is, let's make our decisions in a holistic, global way, and let's make it for many generations out. Not for us, your children, your grandchildren, your grandchildren's children. If we can just do that, we'll make the best decisions.
Thank you so much. And Alejandro, you have the last words here at the stage.
Thank you very much. The problem we're facing in the planet, it's so big that, as Dava was saying, we need everybody and we need all the tools necessary. We need all the technology. We need to build all the trust, and we need to have an indigenous, nature-based solution to what we are facing. alone by yourself or with one technique or one tool or one method is not going to be enough. Time is running very fast, and we need to make sure that we're co-creating and working together in a collaborative way. Thank you.
I want to also extend my thanks for the UNFCCC and the Pavilion for giving us the opportunity and the space here today to share our opinions on technology and its impact. And I want to wish every delegate here, everyone who attends, that hopefully you can bring these messages that has been resonated in this panel back into your negotiations and fight for a better future. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you for an excellent moderation, David.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, David. Great job.
Great job. Bye.